Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 51. Why is a right right? Answering Instagram direct messages this week, which you'd think would be simple enough, short and sweet, but someone stumbled onto a pretty big item here. Maybe they know it, maybe they don't. So this is going to take a minute. The first question is really easy. It's about what will happen if a magician practices baneful craft or baneful magic, harmful magic against others. Bad things. Bad things will happen to you, so don't do it. Bad things are going to return to you energetically, negatory sides of the polarized spectrum. Even if you do baneful magic by accident, not nearly as bad as if you intentionally willed harm against someone or something, but still problematic. Clumsy magic is going to make a mess. So don't do baneful magic on purpose and don't be clumsy. If you are clumsy, you're going to be gifted with the lessons you need to learn moving forward. That's what's going to happen. And if you are baneful intentionally, you know what you have coming to you. Next question has to do with which hand to use if you aren't right hand dominant. Like if you write with your left hand, should you be using your left hand for circle casting and light reception for projection workings? So, like most things in occultism, this tiny, seeming inconspicuous, rather straightforward, and very pertinent question is actually laden with a massive archive of information, perspective, and influence from history, tradition, and school specific knowledge and practice bases. And by school, I do mean which school of magic you practice from or came up in or maybe are coming up in, which is obviously how you're going to acquire and be able to employ your skills. So first of all, let me just say whatever feels the best to you, that is what you should be doing, especially if you're practicing in private where it's not going to have an effect on anyone else publicly or formally. And then let me add to that generally, yes, I think what you're attributing this to is that the hand that writes, the hemisphere of the vessel, which has the greater influence in the carnate realm, is what is known in Western occultism as the receiving hand. So if your writing hand is your left hand, you might be sensing that your left hand, oddly enough, happens to be a receiving hand, and that might be true for you. The polar side of the body, which takes in and can then project, is usually the right, though. And then the left side, the left hand, is the giver. It's that passive influence of constant open-palmed calm, if it is the less dominant hand. So for instance, if you are asking from my personal hermetic training, the school I came up in and had my tools grow and honed in, as I too grew and became honed, because I was right-handed, my positive receiver was my right hand. So in ceremonial rituals such as calling down Luke's energy and casting, it is the right hand which points, receives, and then projects. The right hand which holds athame, chalice, air, wand, dagger, or sword. The right hand which greets and moves at thresholds, which salutes and hails or displays authority to both open and close. The right hand that's going to hold any sort of ritual tool, all of those things. And that might be reversed for you if you feel like your codifying hand, your dominant hand, is your left. Now, when I was talking about myself, I said it was my right hand because, little tidbit, you'll likely come across later if you persist in your practices. As the mind and body are trained and spiral ascend through their path working, so does the ability to pattern and map behaviors, skills, and characteristics of the self, both incarnately and carnately. That is physically, by intention. So sit with what I just said there for a moment. As you move forward in your magic, you are going to be confronted with skills that you have the option of acquiring immediately and then employing. In layman's terms, there comes a point when you become, in this example, ambidextrous, because ambidexterity can be a physical display of one plane of mental balance or awareness that you're choosing or opting into if you choose to allow it. Not everyone does, but a lot of magi do. So a lot of magicians, high priests, ceremonial priests, high witches are going to have that trait. A perfect equanimous balance of the tarot cross, for instance. That's no accident, symbolically. When harmonious dexterity from the byline on the body presents itself as an option to the magician, it is a useful tool, so many embrace it, although there are those who on offer choose instead to return to having a dominant and submissive hand intentionally, no matter how far they progress. It's a choice to be made freely by the practitioner as they see fit. I'm bringing it up because at some point you may just be given ambidexterity, and then the questions of dominance and submission in the right and left hands are probably going to fall away for you a little bit as you come into a different realm of understanding your energy and your ability to work with it. I will state vaguely, there is a door in the Hermetic tradition which gives unto the practitioner years into practice the very authentic relevance of the receiving hand, usually the right hand, of those gestures, magical correspondence to the way energy moves most fluidly in an erect biped of aspiring, soaring spine, which we happen to be. You need only look to the Vitruvian Man, right? Leonardo da Vinci, to see this advised of out in the open for those who have eyes to see. A reason for why we use the one foot to step forward, one hand to salute, receive, and project out. Why the word righteousness evolved etymologically as a word over time, even though it corresponds to direction. Why right was first acquired as a concept applied to directional space, and then passed forward over and over and over again. Why ancient Egyptians depicted their enemies as left-handed when they wanted to insult them or throw a little shade, right? While they, the inspired and reigning force, invested of the ancient mystery schools, were bidextrous by nature. Why most people receive priority information with the right eye. Just scientific fact, if you hold science as somehow different from physical or mystical rationalities, right? There are meanings for why we cover the left and right eye. Meanings for which hand we knock with, which foot we step forward with. The right spinning sun of the Buddhist swastika, meaning, no joke, lit. Just straight up lit, illuminated in tantric traditions. And auspicious Triskelion swings to the right. The Isle of Man runs to the right. Many cultures historically mutilated the left arm. Now, I'm not saying anyone should ever do that, or that it wasn't somewhat of a miscarriage of comprehension, but it's true. Throughout time, there have been cultures that will harm or amputate the left arm to bring even greater dominance and power to the right, which is seen or thought to be good. Any studied anthropologist can attest to how the persistence of the right being dominant culturally as a word, a thought, aligned to goodness or power or light, while the left is being attributed with correlations of evil, bad, weakness, those sorts of things, darkness. With or without seeming cause, that's a fact of history that's still on display in modern times. In America, right hand over the heart to the flag for a citizen, right hand to the temple to salute the flag for an invested officer. In many nations, it's the right hand which shakes upon meeting, because the left hand is considered dirty. The right which raises a glass to toast. At the right hand of God, as a phrase, right? Why right is called right as opposed to wrong, while also being the same exact word applied to our rights. That is, our rights as people, as humans, as individuals. Those things we acknowledge to be our automatic due, automatic state of being invested with or needing to have and hold and protect. So many rights, because gesture and word, symbol, is manifestation meant and generated of intention on this plane. Why have we come to think right is right? Why do you think we've come to think of it that way? There are reasons for that, both rational and mystic. Because yes, those are usually the same thing, actually. And there are reasons for phrases like walk tall, or the very real and unconscious knowledge most automatically have about people who carry themselves with good posture, right? Being confident and empowered. They have that sort of carriage, that comportment of self. So if you're working with Hermetic magics in a formal school, or perhaps informally or on your own with a self-initiation course or a book of some kind, yes, right hand is right because it's the writing hand. If you're right-handed and write with that hand for valid reasons that will make themselves known to you when you're ready. And now that you know all of that, which is a little bit vague in spots, it's there for you to work out. The door is there. You have to choose it. I'm going to further confuse this subject by letting you in on another semi-public secret, oxymoronic, that it's in plain sight for the wolf, but it goes unnoticed by the lamb. Even in all the most common, and remember, I mean common as in demographically or numerically popular, not common as some degradatory, negative label or term. Breathing, for instance, is common, and it's an astounding miracle of magic of the highest order. So there's nothing wrong with common or shared commonalities. Anyway, even in common Western esoteric traditions that employ ceremonial and ritualized gesture and or group magics, say like Catholicism, for example, right? There we have a religion that claims to hate magic while consuming blood, eating carnate body, and doing ritual magic once a week in alignment with the sun. So the Magi who faces the audience, or in this example, the priests of holy occulted orders within Catholicism, because they have their schools and grades and secrets just like we have ours, they actually do their ceremonial gesturing backwards on purpose, although it isn't the most powerful force they themselves can employ or were conditioned to early on, nor necessarily the movement that they use for themselves in private, say when they're making the sign of the cross. And by that I mean a priest that faces out to a crowd of onlookers knows very much from his position, or hers, that he or she serves the optics of the viewer by making the sign of the cross from left to right rather than right to left, which is the correct movement, right to left, but also the mirror movement of doing it the wrong way. The mirror movement, less trained minds are more likely to easily comprehend, codify, and then respond with. So a priest that faces out will do the sign of the cross backwards quite often so that the people watching do it in the right direction. Mirror that movement. The priest does the reflection of the whole. And the priest does it quote unquote wrong on purpose, in a sense, so that the congregation watching does it correctly. And mind you that the priest is not oblivious to the fact that the room of right-handers conditioned to a normalized dominant side of vessel or body and mind, all moving in unison, is the real generator of the energy in that space that they, the priest, are actually raising and guiding. It's a far greater energetic resource than the host, leader, Magi, priest, whatever you want to call it, could ever hope to raise on their own individually. And so it's well worth it to give up some of that minor latent energy as they lead a group. They're giving up that minor energy themselves, doing the gesture in reverse, in order to raise the mirror gesture in far greater multiplicity from the respondents. And you can get really bogged down in that. Just know that it's going on. There's a difference between the wolf and the lamb. So now, all that being said, there's also an element here that I alluded to earlier of the fact that many different backgrounds, traditions, actually do teach their neophytes or acolytes to flip the receiving and giving hands on purpose as a gestural and visual key to the fact that they are a student or practitioner of hidden arts. In a way, that's what a priest is doing when they flip it into reverse. They're saying, I'm a priest and not part of the congregation. I'm a priest rather than a parishioner, one who's chosen to cross over the threshold. There are also places and times where going backwards gesturally, as it were, is required as a signal to another, perhaps of your current grade in a formal setting, or perhaps a password for the month at an actual temple door, or maybe even intentionally doing some ceremony where the use of the energy, the purpose of the ceremony, naturally tends itself towards going against the grain rather than doing it the way you normally would. There could be causes for that. So that confuses things a bit even more. And then there are schools of mystery and religious training on top of that simply choose to do left to right, or more specifically, choose the submissive hemisphere as the dominant for reasons that are coming from a history that has passed down that lore or tradition. Rather than the writing hand being dominant, they're going to see the left as automatically dominant no matter what, because it was the left hand which shot an arrow from the bow held by the god that they revere most, right? Something like that. So just those sorts of differences of schools of thought around energetic training, that creates confusion here as to what is right or wrong, the right or wrong way to go about things. It really is going to depend on what tradition you're coming from, and maybe even where in the world you happen to be, before any of the more secreted flips and reversals even start entering into it. And last but not least, you have the whole realm of right hand versus left hand path teachings, like the left-handed path, which are many and have been around a while, and so are symbolically portrayed with their own lessons and meanings all over the place. In the tarot, in Levi's Baphomet, in a lot of Luciferian religious contexts, right? The left-hand path, where the left is given dominance out of a symbolic correspondence to teachings that are claiming and teaching that this bisected left hand is an oppositional force to the right. If you happen to be of the frame of mind that there is a divide and you're on one side of it, right or left, then that's going to have a lot to do with how your ritual gestures and unconscious intentions around left, right, anything work in your whole day. It's going to have a subconscious effect on how you feel when you walk into a left or right-sided door. And you only have to be a right side of the road American driver who travels to a left-handed driving European country to comprehend the authentic fact of the relevance of that sort of mental conditioning and just how limiting it can be magically when you need to adapt. And I say magically, which is to say energetically and physically and fully relevant mentally, as manifested by the unconscious persistence of behavior into conscious temporal ability or relevance. And people think magic isn't real. Of course it's real. Do you know how hard it is to drive on the left-hand side of the road when you're a right-sided driver? So it is an occultist who lack the common sense of ascendant tech being rational usefully on the ground. I remember before I could control both sides of it, before the dexterity came into play, what that was like to be conditioned to that difference. Until next time.